Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're just giving a few minutes to other participants who are still streaming in at the moment. So we'll give maybe a minute for us to start. So if you can hear me, you're doing the right thing. You can get your speakers to be at its optimum volume and settle down and get comfortable for the next hour and a half, and we will start. Good afternoon, Christopher. So we've got participants coming in from Singapore this afternoon, and also joining us, we have some participants coming in from, the region as well. So I think it's really nice that we're all just gathered here today in the afternoon. So we are just going to give one more minute for the participants to come in. All right, now here we go. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to this live webinar on your next step as a BIM professional. I'm Vanessa Tang from ACE PLP. I'm a BIM solutions provider based in Singapore, and I'm going to be your moderator for this live webinar today. So first things first, please take note that this session is recorded. So the recording will be shared with you as with the presentation materials used by the speakers at the end of this webinar. While you're here, so just have a look at the following house rules. First, please mute yourself on this, so we don't want to accidentally disrupt the webinar. Second, if you've got questions, I welcome you to write them into the chat box, and that's located at the bottom of your screen on the control that says chat. So you can write your questions at any time, and we will be addressing them near the end of the webinar when the speakers have finished their presentation materials. If you encounter any technical issues, what you can do is to send a message to one of the BSI staff in the chat box. And finally, again, just to remind you, this webinar is recorded and will be sent to you at the end of this session. All right. Now, today's topic revolves around ISO 19650, which is the organization and digitization of information about buildings and civil engineering works, specifically in building information models, or what we commonly know as BIM. ISO 19650 has provided a framework for us to manage information, including the exchange, record, versioning, and organization of information for everyone involved in a construction project. It has important changes for the way that construction projects around the world are being managed, particularly as construction processes revolve more heavily around information to become more productive and efficient. So this afternoon, in collaboration between BSI and the Singapore Institute of Building, we're just going to call that SIBL in short, we brought this event together to help you to understand how international standards are shaping the next wave of evolution in the built environment. This comes as public contracts in Singapore are also increasingly referencing the use of ISO 19650 standards in local construction projects. Now, I want to invite everyone to be participative in this event and to please feel free to ask any questions you have to our speakers through the chat box at the bottom side of your screen. You can write your questions there at any time throughout this event, and we will answer them through the Q&A session scheduled near the end of the session. Now, in our lineup today, we have 5 speakers to cover different aspects of ISO 19650 of interest to you. Our guest of honor, Dr. Susie Katit, President of SIBL, and Andy Butterfield, BSI Global Managing Director for the Built Environment, will lead the way. I'm going to start by introducing Dr. Susie. Dr. Susie Katit is the Regional Director of Skjord, with over 17 years of international experience in high-tech livestock farm projects and construction management. She's the first female president of SIBL, and as our president, she leads an association comprising of qualified professionals engaged in building practices in the development, construction, and maintenance of buildings. Dr. Susie, please.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all of you, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to our webinar. The journey of BIM in SIBL has been for many years, and I recall my first UK learning journey with BCA in 2013. We did our first learning journey in UK, and I think that is where we started to look into what BIM means to us in the Singapore context. Right, I have some slides to share, so I'll get Derek to switch on to the next slide. All right, can everybody see the slide? Yes. Okay, first of all, let me give you a very brief introduction of who Singapore Institute of Building Limited is, in SIBL in short. This voluntary organization, non-profit organization, is actually incorporated in 1981 to be the professional institute in Singapore for, like what Vanessa has said, is for qualified professionals engaged in building practices, be it in a managerial, technical, or administrative capacity in the development of construction and then maintenance of building, including those who are engaged in the academic research and teaching. I recall joining SIBL 12 years ago because I was in the academic research and teaching sector before I joined the real world, being in the construction. Right, next slide, please. I attended a cross-workforce leadership program recently, and I felt that I need to share this slide with all of you. Here you can see that how Singapore has shifted from a labor to knowledge-based economy. In 2010, Singapore shifted more towards productivity-driven growth. Singapore has really made good progress in nurturing highly skilled people, growing in an innovative economy, and building a distinctive global city. There are many opportunities for us to innovate, deepen our capabilities, remaining open and connected, as well as staying relevant to the next world. Right, next slide, please. Okay, in just few months' time, the COVID-19 crisis has actually brought about years of change in the way companies in all sectors and regions do business. And that happens in my company also. The demand for BIM professionals with international standards in each area will increase tremendously. Multinational company or corporations, for example, they have placed a higher value on their employees with professional expertise and knowledge of the BIM international standard. Next slide, please. Singapore has over the years enjoyed sustained economic growth since independence. Although productivity performance has been weak in the, if you can see here, in the domestically oriented sectors, especially in the construction, which I've highlighted here, Singapore have actually made good progress since 2010 by developing higher skills in our workforce, growing an innovative economy, and working towards building a distinctive global smart city. All right, next slide, please. I think, yeah. At present, Singapore's built environment industry, I should say, is fast adopting IDD, where we call the integrated digital delivery, and to integrate the work processes and to connect stakeholders working on the same project throughout the construction and the building life cycle. This includes things like design, fabrication, and assembly on site, as well as the operations and maintenance of building. If you see that the construction industry transformation map, the ITM here, provided by Singapore Building and Construction Authority, BCA in short, has outlined the need to build a tech leveraging built environment workforce for a smart nation. Here then we see the importance of the three keywords: internationalization, digitalization, and innovation. That's where we in SIBL are promoting a lot. Right, go to the next slide, please. Okay, in SIBL, we do have different kinds of membership, and we also have companies joining us as enterprise member. Here I'm showing you an example. Cheongseng Holdings Limited is an enterprise member of SIBL. Over the years, I remember in 2013, I traveled together with Mr. Peck in UK on the learning journey. And he has shared a lot over the years of how they have adopted digital application in constructions, where common digital environment called CDE is being applied to connect between the main contractor, subcontractors, developers, and consultants. Yeah, it's a very interesting journey. Next slide, please. What do they do if with this common data environment called CDE, the company is able to better integrate work processes and connect stakeholders working on projects throughout the building life cycle? Our enterprise member, Cheongseng, they provide one-stop digital solution for conceptualization of design integration among stakeholders, and DFMA, which stands for Design for Manufacturing Assembly, IDD, Integrated Digital Delivery for construction and building up a digital base for facilities management. Right, next slide, please. Okay, there's another thing that another company that I would like to share, because Sonny will share about his experiences. Now, Surbana Jurong in Singapore is an integrated smart city solution developed from over more than 30 years of experience in deploying its digital application, especially in the Singapore's public housing and also in the large-scale infrastructure assets. Here, they actually provide a one-stop digital platform called 24K, where they allow maximum flexibility for clients to connect or to plug in their various digital or technology devices for FM purpose in a single dashboard management system. Yeah, this is a very interesting things, and I think Surbana Jurong has got a lot to share. Right. So bringing stakeholders on board the digitalization journey is integral to ensuring continuous success and progress in our building ecosystem. A strong base of knowledge in BIM based on international standards will complement local building authority requirement, and it will also equip our built environment professionals to achieve a higher quality and productivity, especially in project delivery and facilities management. Okay, right. I only have 10 minutes. Next slide, please. Okay, SIBL, Singapore Institute of Building, plays a very important role in thoughts and as well as practice leadership for BIM professions, which is an important criterion to ensure that the members of SIBL are equipped with the knowledge, experience, as well as necessary skill sets to meet the challenges of the increasingly challenging and complex built environment industry. Well, I will not take so much of your time. Last but not least, I hope that you will be inspired by the contents that we're going to share and have curated for you today. So let's now hear it from the rest of the experts. Thank you, and have a very good afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Susie. Our other guest of honor today is Mr. Andy Butterfield, the Managing Director of Global Built Environment at BSI. Andy drives BSI's built environment portfolio and strategy, enabling clients of BSI to drive organization excellence, health, safety, and digital adoption. BSI's built environment services portfolio includes the BIM Kite Mark certification, Smart Cities, and Communities Kite Mark certification, as well as the ISO Management System certification, structural Eurocodes, and the Key Mark. Let's hear more from him. Andy, please.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Vanessa, and good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's event. I think Vanessa's captured my role at BSI just beautifully. Just to summarize, really, as my role as Managing Director at BSI for the built environment, I work across all of our various services and streams and geographies to coordinate our efforts, to collaborate with industry, to really sort of drive positive change in the sector. And for me, actually, collaboration is really key. 10 years ago, when I first started to get involved with BIM and shaping standards, it was very clear to us that a simple transformation was happening in the sector, driven by technology. But technology was a tool really for enabling increased coordination and collaboration, and particularly around information exchange. So we've been on quite a journey, really helping the global built environment sector adopt this new technology and drive positive change. I'm just going to share in a few slides some of our background. Before I do, just to explain who we are, BSI is a global business improvement partner, and that happens to include the UK's national standards body, which is very relevant to the work we've been undertaking with BIM. And what we do, we'll put very simply, what we do is we help organisations face today's challenges and turn them into opportunities. Really, and that's very, very relevant to the BIM journey. Our role is to really help innovation to succeed, to work with industry and enable a standardised way of working to enable outcomes to be realised. And we do this in a number of ways by sharing, whether it's sharing knowledge through standards, whether it's assessing organisations, helping them to understand and adopt best practice. And we've been doing this now for 120 years. So there's a lot of history and a lot of experience that we carry in doing so. Next slide, please. So why do we do this? Well, this is a really important purpose. Our founding purpose is to benefit society. So if we think really over the last, let's reflect really on the last 18 months and everything that we faced together globally. You know, as the financial, environmental and social climates continue to shift and we face challenges where we have to adapt suddenly, you know, our founding purpose has never been, you know, more relevant than it is today. And that's really to help organizations to adapt to sudden change, to help them really succeed in make them future ready. So very much our purpose is enshrined in our statement of inspiring trust for a more resilient world. And certainly over the last 18 months, 2 years, we've really been facing some challenges with the changing situation. Next slide, please. So just before I hand over to one of my colleagues to explain in a little more detail, I just wanted to explain BSI's role, not just as the UK's national standards body, but also its work in supporting global standardisation through our support for ISO. So in the bottom right of this slide, you'll see that one of the areas that we've outlined here is our ability to shape what we call PAS standards, publicly available specifications and agile standards. Put simply, this is a service where we're able to work with industry to develop a standard rapidly where there's no standard currently available and where there really is a challenge that needs to be addressed. And this was very much where BSI started its journey in shaping the world's first standards to support BIM. Back several years ago, the challenge was, how do you actually enable complex supply chains to exchange information and use digital technology to improve outcomes, improve efficiency and reduce waste? So that really started our work in shaping these standards to support that mission, primarily in the UK. But several years later, we continued to, as we always do, work with international standards bodies, and you can see many of those listed here. But in the top left, you can see that actually we support ISO and work with ISO very closely. So the suite of standards that we initially launched, and they were adopted around the world in different regions. It wasn't, it started in the UK, but then the standards were very widely used, paved the way for us to support with ISO developing the current suite of ISO 19650 standards. And then over the last couple of years, have we seen those standards launch from ISO? From my perspective, I've certainly seen a lot more adoption and alignment with standards in using them really to successfully deploy BIM and really bring about those positive outcomes that we all know can be achieved through using this technology. Next slide, please. So just a snapshot, really. This is just really a snapshot of some of the clients that we've been working with over the last few years. And as you can see there, the list is now quite extensive of countries where our standards and our certification systems, the BSI Kite Mark, are being used to help the sector really align and really transform and really reap the benefits of this digital transformation program that we're seeing so much of. From the current count, I think it's around 24 countries, and the numbers of clients now are multiples of hundreds of clients globally, where we're working to help synergize their operations in construction and also into asset management. So really just a brief overview from me on the work that we've been doing to support BIM. And I'd just like to say before I hand over how delighted we are to be working in partnership with Singapore Institute of Building. We share many common objectives, and I very much look forward to continuing to work together to really help the sector embrace and adapt to the changes it's facing. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Andy. So from Andy, we've heard quite a bit about the importance of ISO and how standards shape the built environment. What exactly is ISO 19650? We have Mr. Tan Kok Hui, the Built Environment Sector Development Director at the BSI Group, to tell us more. Kok Hui, over to you.
Thanks, Vanessa. I hope everybody can hear me loud and clear. Yeah. Yes, I'm Kok Hui here again, and very good afternoon and welcome everyone to this particular session as well. And I would like to, over the next couple of minutes or 20 minutes or so, bring you through what could BIM adoption. Could it be a strategic route to rebuilding a commercial future? Just to give you a bit of highlight here, what it means. And go through with you some of the business benefits that some of the organizations that having implemented BIM over the past couple of years, what were their observations? And of course, give you the aspect of what the BIM standards landscape is currently, and a little bit of overview in terms of where we are in today's world with BIM implementation and adoption, as well as I'll run through a fair bit of the key roles within the specified 19650, and as well then how BSI and SIBL can support you in your digital transformation. Yeah, next please. Yeah, so I would like to start with the definition of BIM. In the audience, I'm sure everyone has a role to play in the construction sector, and there's some BIM elements in there as well. But I'll just like to touch on the definition itself. If you look on the left, I'll just read it out for a start. Pointer number one, BIM is the process of generating and managing building data during its life cycle. And this process encompasses building geometry, spatial relationships, geographic information, and quantities and properties of building components. So this is the worded definition of BIM. You read it, you understand it, yeah? But if you look across to the right, this visual will give you exactly what the words means, yeah? It says BIM defines a set of processes where you manage, you produce, and you exchange information in the design, construction, and management of a building or infrastructure. So this BIM, in fact, is the processes that is typed by digital information. And these processes would involve series of individual discipline models that will come together to form the federated model for use and coordination. Yeah, and across the whole supply chain within the project, Derek, the previous slide. Across the supply chain, they have to understand these processes and how to utilize and how to use them, plus what would the outcome of BIM be? Yeah, the outcome of BIM would generally fall into 4 areas. That is why we implement BIM. Yeah, one is definitely a focused production of information. You want to be very focused, you want to be very timely. And you also would increase the access of information, yeah, the ease of getting your hands onto timely information, plus increasing the collaboration across the supply chain, yeah, the ecosystem of that project. Last but not least, with this timely transparency and collaboration, we are looking at trusting the information that's on the table. Yeah, so this would definitely be the outcomes of BIM. Yep. Next slide, please. Okay, then back in the year 2018, the Boston Consulting Group did publish a report or a white paper on the right of this PPT. You see that an action plan to accelerate building information modeling adoption. What it means to produce this particular report or white paper, they did many rounds of surveys with clients in the ecosystem through quite a few geographies. And what they found were 3 outstanding ambitions that came out of these surveys. The first one is cost reduction. So I think this is the number one priority or number one consideration in the built ecosystem. How do we reduce costs? Knowing for the fact that over the years, material cost goes up, labor cost goes up, plus other costs. Yeah, so there's a key element of cost and how do we keep them? How do we maintain them and how do we reduce them? Second thing is the environmental impact coming from the built sector. Yeah, we know that we consume that much material to build a structure or the infra, and they produce CO2, and there will be construction waste. So how do we, as built sector, play a part in minimizing this environmental impact? And the third pointer here is what they found is there is an increasing urbanization, and how could built sector respond to this increasing urbanization? Yeah, and we all know that in today's world, about 55% of the world's population sits in or lives in urban areas. And United Nations has, estimated that by the year 2050, 68 to 70% of the world's population would be living in urban areas. So within the built sector, how do we respond to this increasing need for, increasing urbanization? Yeah, and you take these 3 pointers and you try to look at BIM and where BIM plays in here. Has BIM a role in helping to, take care and take care of these considerations of these 3 elements? I believe there definitely is. Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay, and now we take a look at some of these benefits, yeah, from using BIM over the years with these few clients that we have talked to, yeah. And RTA on the left, top left-hand corner, they are the rail transport authority in Dubai, and what they have found, having implemented BIM in their projects, they found that the cost reductions went up by 10%. So they saved cost at 10%. And the projects were completed faster on average at 15%. So there's a cost element, there's a time element there that there were savings. And Wilmot Dixon on the bottom left-hand corner, a designer in UK, having implemented BIM, they find that they could make timely decisions, more informed decisions on a timely basis with BIM. Yeah. So what they found is when information comes to them, it is live, it is timely, and they can respond to it quickly to approve and so on and so forth. So this definitely helps in reducing time and increasing productivity for the projects. Yep. And on top right, for contractors, one of the key elements that Taylor Woodruff in UK found was the handover process become much more easier. Why? Because with BIM implementation, all information or all data were collected from day one right down to handing over. So during the handing over stage, they find it was much easier compared to without BIM. So this really helped them in terms of having a good handing over process with their clients. And Legrand, a supplier, what their feedback was with BIM implementation, they found that they were in the front. They are not coming in right at the tail end of the projects where decisions need to be made. By then, the decision making was very early and they were in the front. So these were some of the benefits that Legrand found. So if we put this together, we will see that there's cost saving, there's time saving, there's informed decision on a very timely basis, there's ease of handover, and being in the front, involved in the project throughout. Yeah. So these are some of the benefits that the clients has observed and feedback that this is what they see with BIM implementation. It really helped the organization moving forward. Yep. Next, please. Okay, so we saw a little bit of the white paper from Boston Consulting Group. We saw a little bit of benefits with implementing BIM. So what is BIM 19650? So as mentioned earlier, BIM 19650 is about information management. It's about digitization of information. Yeah, and we described it earlier. Now, in the next couple of slides, I'll run through with you what is the BIM standards landscape, what is the BIM adoption around the world, give a high level, and how we support you. Next, please. Okay, in terms of the BIM standards, I think Andy has mentioned earlier, we BSI were the first movers and we shaped the PAS 1192 standards, and that was used many years back to really coordinate and in a controlled and coordinated manner in terms of implementing BIM across geographies. Yeah, the clients, the government agencies were using them, the PAS 1192 standards. And over the years, it has developed into the ISO 19650 standards. So back in 2018, Part 1 and Part 2 of 1192 became 19650 Part 1 and 19650 Part 2. Yeah. And last year, in the month of August, 1192 Part 3, which is asset management, became 19650 Part 3. And in July, Part 5 became 19650 Part 5, which is BIM security mindedness. So this is the evolution, yeah, of 1192 into 19650, and this is what we have today. Yep, next please. Okay, I want to now bring you through how you look at BIM standards across the asset life cycle. Yeah, and on the left, I'd like to just go a little bit deeper into what is 19650 Part 2. What does it mean to you? I think for all of us who are in the build sector, be it you are a client, a specifier, a contractor, a supplier, or a subcontractor, 19650 Part 2 is relevant to everyone in this ecosystem. Why? You look at the title, it says BIM design, construction, and commissioning. It states everything from start, right? Assessment and need. The clients will state what they want in projects. And then it goes to tender invitations, how you respond to tenders, how they appoint, how you get people mobilized and start with the project proper, how you produce the information, the drawings, and everything needed to get the project started, the construction started, and then in and during that, how you exchange all this information, and finally, when you complete the project, how you hand over the project closeout. All these are stated very clearly in Part 2, so it's relevant to everyone in the build ecosystem. In fact, now we look at the asset life cycle from brief to decommissioning. I just mentioned Part 2 definitely in brief, design, and construction. What happens when the project is handed over to in-use state? Yeah, then 19650 Part 3 kicks in. This is asset management. This will handle the in-use to decommissioning stage. And Part 1 being guide and principle stretches across the asset lifecycle, and Part 5 being BIM security mindedness stretches across from brief right down to decommissioning. We can't have Part 5, starting in just construction. It has to be across the whole project lifecycle. Yep. So this would be how you use BIM standards across the asset lifecycle. Next, please. Now, I want to share with you a very high level where we are today with BIM adoption in the world. Yeah, you see a map here, a world map here, and you see varying degree of maturity, right? I would like to start with an example just from America and Canada. What we see in the last 2 or 3 years, we see an increasing use of BIM, especially in public projects, governmental projects, but also we see some private projects taking up BIM as well. That's over the last couple of years. And in Europe, definitely BIM is running much faster in Europe. UK, we were the first users of BIM. And the UK government actually, in fact, realized from BIM implementation over the years, there is generally a 15 to 20% savings that they have gathered from implementing BIM. So they have indeed a very good outcome from BIM implementation across government projects and also private projects. Yeah. And then in terms of mandatory BIM implementation, we see it happening in France, Germany, and so on. Yeah. I would like to just highlight one country in Europe, which is quite special, Sweden. Sweden has no mandated requirements for BIM implementation, but they are one of the highest adopter and users of BIM. Yeah, for the fact that, you know, the two key reasons, cost reduction, productivity improvement. This is what is happening in Sweden, even until today, with the use of BIM. Yep, and in Asia, I'd just like to highlight Hong Kong here. Hong Kong has mandated BIM for public projects since 2017. And over the years, they have now made it mandatory for BIM implementation for any projects that's more than HK $30 million. That is in Hong Kong. And in China, we see BIM implementation in public projects and in some of the clients as well. In the bigger developments, we also see BIM expectations in there. And of course, in Singapore, we know anything that is 5,000 square meters and above, we need to do BIM e-submissions. So this is just to give you a high level view of where we are with BIM in the world today. We see an uptrend, we see a trending north. We see especially over the last 24 months, as Andy has shared in that one slide about the certified clients we've asked. In fact, today we have about 400 certified clients, and every day we do have inquiries coming in about BIM training and BIM certification across the globe. So this is what we see from BSI view, that where the BIM implementation and adoption is trending. Yep. Next, please. All right. I would like to just now go into a little bit more about the 19650 expectation on key functions, key roles and functions. Yeah. So appointing party, lead appointing party, and appointed party. So in our term, it will be the owners, and then the specifiers and or main contractor, and then the subcontractors. Yeah. This slide doesn't represent, it's not representative of everything that's stated in 19650. I would just like to draw your attention to this couple of key responsibilities. From the appointing party point of view, the owners, definitely you need to, they will be expected to set the requirements and milestones of the projects, what's needed in the projects, the timeline and everything. That's from the appointing party. With a BIM project, if they say the project they want to implement and have BIM in there, they must look at the capacity and capability of their supply chain, of whoever is coming in to execute the project. They must have a first view, and whether this supply chain are able to execute the BIM way. Yeah, so this falls with the appointing party, which is the owner. And next, they definitely have to, you know, establish what would be the CDEB, the common data environment. They have to make sure that, you know, it's there and expect everyone to fall in place and use them. Last but not least, at various stages, in critical stages, they must be in there for the verification and validation matters. Yeah, and with the specifiers or the main contractors, the lead appointing party, a lot of times in 19650 is talking about information, how they cascade, how they collate, how they exchange, vice versa, whichever way. Yeah, it's all about handling information in a CDE environment and how they ensure that this CDE environment, any challenges in CDE environment are taken care of, and how everybody falls in place and use the CDE as a means of executing and maintaining the information, right? And last but not least, this is something that you need to be very aware of if you are a main contractor or if you are a specifier. Down the supply chain, the other contractors or the other suppliers, if they are not that competent or they don't have the capacity in executing with BIM, then what do you do with them, right? So in 19650, there is a little bit of expectation on the lead appointing party to provide for some sort of training or coaching to ensure that down the line, everybody have that capacity and capability and competence to function in this BIM environment. So that would be the lead appointing party. And last but not least, the appointed party being a subcontractor or supplier, definitely how you produce the information, how you check them, how you assign the status, how you collaborate with everyone to resolve issues, and you have to respect the federation strategy, right? So these are a few of the responsibilities I would just like to bring out in today's session. Next, please. Now then, how do you function in there? Yeah, being the various stakeholders across the supply chain. First thing first, I would believe training is extremely important. Of course, processes and technology is as important. Of course, with process, you purchase the standards, and then you put the procedures in place. With hardware, with technology, you purchase the hardware, software, and make sure there's infrastructure around it. Yeah, these are the things that you can put in place. But what about people? People do they have the knowledge? Do they have the skills? Are they specific enough in their function within the BIM environment? Do they have that ownership? This is something that is of a key consideration for a successful BIM project. Yeah, the people are extremely important in there. And this is where we, BSI and SIBL, feels that training for the people, equipping them the right skills and right knowledge to execute and to understand that BIM environment is extremely important. Next, please. So what could be the trend in future in consideration for training? Yeah, you look at future trends and emerging disruptions. Today we know digitalization is everywhere. Yeah, everything we are doing is IoT and digital and so on and so forth. So it's already here at the doorstep and we are using it. Yeah, future in terms of specialization, in terms of investment in technology, these are the future trends as well. But and if you look at BIM and we look at individuals, are we there utilizing BIM and equipping ourselves, making sure that when this comes at our doorstep, we are ready for them? So this would be the trends that an individual and organization has to consider as well. Yep, next please. So in terms of how then you can develop yourself in this BIM ecosystem of BIM, so-called the standards. Yeah. First thing first, what we believe is definitely awareness and fundamentals. We know that every individual has a specific role in that whole BIM environment. He's doing something, then somebody else is doing something. But would every individual understand how his functions or how his work affect the rest in this BIM environment? So awareness and fundamentals is extremely important for a person to really understand 19650 part 1 right down to part 5, what it means, what it is, an overview, so that when he's doing his work, he understands the role he plays, yeah, and he appreciates the role he plays. Yeah, of course, then practical implementation throughout the years of using BIM, right down to understanding security mindedness in BIM. So this is a step approach that an individual can look at in building your expertise or your competence or knowledge around BIM 19650. Next, please. So this is the two qualification pathways that BSI and SIBL will be launching. I'll leave the details to Hao Yong in the later session. One, if you look on the left, this is design and delivery professional. This will very much be for everyone that's doing construction with the projects till handing over, yeah. And asset management will be the owners and asset management stakeholders. You can actually look at how you build up your competence with asset management within the BIM environment. So we have actually two pathways. I won't go into the details. Hao Yong will touch on them in more details later on. So what are the benefits? Just very quickly, as a practitioner, a person would be able to demonstrate understanding information management and collaborative working principles during project delivery phase. Yeah. As a professional, you bring yourself to understanding a little bit deeper and much more about information security management within the BIM environment. And as a certified professionals, you have a practical implementation experience to go along with. So this would be the benefits, and this is how you actually demonstrate your competence with BIM knowledge and skills. Yep. Next, please. So then BIM qualifications, there's two pathways. You can choose from BIM project information qualification or the BIM asset information qualification. And I've just mentioned, you can also go for a certified professional, and that is a 3-year program. In fact, after 3 years, you can get yourself certified. There's a process, and that is a process that will be repeated 3 years upon 3 years, and you keep your status as a certified professional. All right. Okay. So thank you for hearing me, and I'll hand over back to Vanessa.
Thank you, Kok Hui. With a background understanding of what ISO 19650 is all about, let's now go into some of the finer details, like the application of the standards on construction projects. Next up, we have Mr. Sunny Andalis, Senior Executive BIM Manager at Subana Jurong, who has kindly agreed to share his personal journey as a BIM professional, as well as his knowledge and experience of implementing ISO 19650 on his BIM projects with us. Sunny, please tell us more.
Hello, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Oh, okay. So good afternoon to all of the participants. I'm here basically to give you an overview. What is my experience, with implementing ISO 19650? I mean, personally, so my personal journey. I was part of the Kuala Lumpur Singapore High Speed Rail, the Changi Terminal 5, and the Tuas Water Reclamation project. And then what's the motivation for me to enroll to the BSI course on ISO 19650? And then from another perspective is my company's certification with respect to the ISO standards. Forward, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to start with, I was a BIM manager in AECOM, Singapore. So this is just a picture of us, the BIM managers from Singapore, Malaysia, and Hong Kong. Okay, next. Next, please. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first thing that I'd like to share is that for that particular project, for the Kuala Lumpur Singapore High Speed Rail, at the time we were actually dealing with this particular specifications that says that the contractor or consultant has to deliver the project based on the BIM maturity level 2, and then they are referring the standards related to the PAS 1192 part 2 and part 3. Okay, so for that, what we did is next, please. So what we did with that particular project is that we done a series of workshops with the client, the Land Transport Authority, and then we said, okay, we understand the PAS 1192, and then we know at the time that there is ISO 19650 is being developed, and then we actually engage the client to create an employer information requirement. Next slide, please. So this is what we did. You see, so this is actually the actual slides that we discussed with the client. So we basically said to them, okay, we need to prepare an organizational information requirement, asset information requirement, employee information requirement, and then the supplier will have the BIM execution plan, the project information model, and the asset information model. So for that particular project, it is actually compliant to the PAS 1192, the BS 1192, and the ISO 19650. Next, please. So it's the same thing. So we are AECOM Singapore was actually doing the Singapore portion of the Kuala Lumpur High Speed Rail, but it's the same to the Malaysia side. So you can see from this particular document, the project delivery framework, and then under standards, we were actually using the BS 1192 and the PAS 1192 as well. Yeah. So for that particular project, we are actually employing already those standards. So we need, for my case, my motivation is I need to be certified for this particular standard so that I would have the correct interpretation of this standards. The problem with reading it on your own is that you have your own interpretation, you see, and then you're advising a client, and then the confusion actually just spills over. So it's important to actually get a proper understanding of what the standards will actually says. Next slide, please. So it's the same thing for for another project that we did, so based on the PAS 1192 and the BS 1192 that becomes the ISO standards, we actually advise MMC Gamuda for the KVAMRT line 2. Specifically for this is basically our master coding list and our project configuration for the CDE. So we applied what we learned to our infrastructure projects in Malaysia as well for AECO Malaysia. Next slide. Another one that we have done is I've done myself is the Changi Terminal 5. I was part of the Inter-Airside Road Connector project. It's under the tunnels package. Next slide. And from that, the client, Changi Airport, also has an employer information requirement for the Changi East development. And then we read that and compared it to our experience in Hong Kong for the Hong Kong International Airport, the one that you see on the right. This is the BIM Information Modeling Consultancy that AECOM Hong Kong has done. So we compared it and then we say, okay, this makes sense, and then it's following the ISO standards. Next, please. So we actually have replied to that particular employer information requirement based on our understanding of the ISO 19650, and then created our own BIM execution plan. Next, please. So it's the same thing. So this is the actual BIM execution plan, and then if you can see there, we are actually referencing the BS 1182 to that particular project. Next slide, please. Another project that I work with is actually the Tuas Water Reclamation Plant as part of the DTSS Phase 2 for CH2M and Jacob Singapore. And then what we did there is that the client actually has this building information modeling requirements in the tender documentation. And then as the consultant, as the lead consultant for the project, we actually responded with an employer information requirement. And then as mentioned, so this is a water reclamation plant. The one that you see on the right is actually coming from our another project in the UK called Thames Tideway. So Jacobs UK is actually the BIM consultant for that particular project, and then so we actually reference it. So what I'm trying to say here is that understanding the ISO standards is really important. You see, so there's a project in Singapore, so we benchmark it to our equivalent wastewater project in the UK. Next slide, please. Yeah, so getting back to the reason why I wanted it to be certified. Obviously, this particular certification is international. I like the fact that BSI is actually giving this certification. It is an international recognized certification. So this is, for example, my CV now, the BIM Project Information and Asset Information Certified Professional is clearly indicated in my professional qualifications. So it's a good thing, it's also a branding thing. And also in my LinkedIn profile, it's prominently stated there. So the kite mark certification that you see there from BSI that says that I'm the BIM Asset Information Professional, that I'm also as well a BIM Project Information Professional is actually well stated there. Yeah. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so that is my professional journey with the ISO certification. So at the same time, as mentioned, I'm currently the BIM manager for the Surbadu Jurong. So Surbadu Jurong has its own ISO 19650 journey. Okay, so this is our group digital group SJ group digital portal. Next slide. Next slide, please. And in our digital portal, you can clearly see that there is we have a lot of documentation that is related to ISO 19650. And then as myself has recently been certified this year, I'm actually reviewing this and putting in my input to all of this documentation. Okay, next slide. So the purpose of this documentation is that when we start a project, in Singapore, there's a lot of flavors with BIM. You have BIM, you have VDC, you have IDD, and so on and so forth. So how we implement ISO 18650 into that different flavors of BIM, So we actually put that into writing, and then we have manuals to actually say, okay, so if your project ask for a BIM how to say this standards, this will be it. If your project is asking for VDC standards, this will be your guide. And then the last part is, if your project is actually demanding or requiring an IDD or the integrated digital delivery standards, this is the way forward. Next, please. And then you can see that from our how to say this documentation. So this is just a typical example of our company's ISO 18650 documentation related to BIM, IDD, and VDC. Yeah. So next slide. And in the last part, next slide, please. So in the last part, with ISO, obviously you need to be audited for that. Okay, so we clearly to be able to maintain or retain your ISO certification, you need to nominate a project that you have done. So, for example, in this particular project, we have done the Keppel data center, and this is actually the project team, and then the ISO team, and then due to the COVID situation, all of these audits, is actually done now virtually. Yeah. So you need to prepare the documentation for your company's deployment and company's deployment of the ISO standards. So you have to document everything. You have to prove that you're actually doing what is actually mentioned in the ISO 19650 standards. So that is another part of the company level deployment for ISO 19650. Yeah, that's all I can share to you, and back to the host.
Thank you, Sunny. People, process, and technology are important critical success factors for organizational change. Every organization leads with its people, and those that take a people-centric approach will find themselves in the lead. So this brings us to the crux of our discussion today. How do we train people to implement organizational excellence in construction projects? So we have Mr. Lu Hao Yong, who will round things up for us with an overview of the BIM Professional certification, BIM Professional qualifications offered by BSI. Hao Yong, please.
Thank you, Vanessa. Just want to check if everyone can hear me fine. Good to go. Thank you. So thank you, Vanessa, and thanks, Sonny and Kokui as well previously for sharing the different processes and the enablers to be able to implement BIM effectively and be able to benefit from it as well. So my name is Hao Yong. I'm actually the Training Business Manager with BSI Singapore, and I'd like to share with you basically on how BSI can support you and essentially some of the tips and tricks that we can look at as well in order for you and your organization to be equipped with the knowledge that's required for BIM as well as ISO 19650. So within the next 15 minutes, I understand we are at the end of a very lengthy, hopefully you find it to be very beneficial as well, webinar. We will be going through on some of the ways on how you can obtain knowledge on the ISO standard and BIM as well. And also just introduce to you the training and certification program that BSI and SIBL will be joint launching as well. And as well as some of the details that encompasses it as well. Derek, can you go next? So like what the previous speaker has shared before this, right? So being able to implement BIM, different organizations you will be at different stage at the moment. I think every companies will have its different maturity, but a very important enabler, right, for you to be able to implement BIM effective really is to have your people, not one person, but in fact a group of people, right, that will be very familiar with the knowledge and skills that's required for you to perform and implement BIM in your organization. So other than, of course, the technical skills when it comes to BIM, for example, like using in the different softwares relating to BIM and the technical part of it, there's also the process knowledge as well, where this is where the ISO standard, which will become very useful because it provides you yourself, your contractors, and the specifiers, so all of you, a very common language for you to agree on and be able to collaborate more effectively. So going on that, some of the things most organizations will do is by starting is actually to buy the standard and read it. So of course, this is like what Sonny has shared earlier, right? He will look at the standards and then try to compare different requirements and try to align them through something like a matrix for you to understand what are the actions you need to take, for example. What we've been working on very effectively with our clients as well, especially for clients that will be certified, through BSI, potentially as well, on the different BIM Mark of Trust. We do have training courses. So one of it is we provide qualifications, so which I'll share later on as well. There's actually a pathway that we have launched and will provide you with international and also local recognition, okay, for you to be able to show and be able to demonstrate to your customers, okay, that your people or yourself are competent in BIM and be able to demonstrate it through different assessment as well as your actual experience. Derek, can you go next? Right. So talking about knowledge, also typically, some of the method that you can obtain knowledge or keep yourself updated with the different inputs and different latest thought leaderships on BIM and as well as 19650. So a very obvious or very direct way of getting information, of course, will be through webinars or e-learning. So webinars like today as well. So what you can also do is you can also follow BSI's BIM environment updates and newsletter as well. Very often we will have different kind of webinar focusing on different topics on the BIM environment and provide you really with the latest industry updates. Right, like what we shared earlier, you could also look into purchasing the standards from BSI Shop, which will allow you to have access, by purchasing it, have access to the standards and be able to see what are the different standards relating to BIM, which Kopi has shared earlier. Right, and also you can also look into resources for e-learning. I believe now online, right, you can look for many e-learning resources out there, including those from the Mass Open online courses. BSI ourselves, we are also launching an e-learning module very soon for introduction to BIM. So if it's something that you feel could be very interesting for your wider audience, right, not other than your technical team or your BIM management team, right, it's something that you can look into as well. And finally, the last two portions I think will be very crucial, especially if you're joining in, if you're currently holding the role of being a BIM manager or in a certain capacity, a technical manager as well, is to take up a formal course which will allow you to understand the important knowledge that is required for you to enable yourself to be able to implement ISO 19650 as well as BIM within your organization, right? And then of course a qualification if you would like to further on to be able to get recognized on your competence and your knowledge, which will help you set yourself apart from your competitors, right? And of course, last but not least, I think will be very crucial is that when it comes to industry changes like this, I think we wouldn't be able to do it effectively without a professional network. So I'd like to point out an example like SIBL do have a very wide membership kind of qualifications that's available. So also joining a professional network sometimes will very often be able to allow you to share knowledge and be able to get knowledge from the respective members as well. And overall as an industry, to be able to share all these best practices. Right. So I just like to bring everyone back on driving the need, just to elaborate further on what Kopi mentioned about the needs for training and qualification. So other than the actual competence need in order for organizations to implement effectively, as a BIM manager and technical manager, very often I think in your organization you sort of be the source of truth or the point of contact when your organization is faced with any questions relating to BIM. Right? I think that's perfectly normal as well, because I think generally there's a lack of or really lack of the general consensus in how the different level of BIM knowledge that which an organization would have or require at the moment, right? So generally for the sector, I think like what Sonny has shared earlier, the specifiers, especially the main cons, right? The building owners, they are asking consultants and contractors now more and more about the competence or even whether they have track records in successfully managing BIM projects, and then to be able to demonstrate, their capability and capacity. Organizations themselves will need people who understand BIM, so that in order to be able to implement effectively, not just for the technical managers, but also the other supporting functions that be supporting the group that's managing BIM, right? And like what Sonny has shared as well for the company as well, it's important for you to show that you are aware and be able to align to the different international standards and best practices. So this is where the ISO 19650 knowledge will come in to help you to really understand, especially if you're working on cross-border international projects, right? And ultimately, at the professional basis, I think it's very important for you to have some kind of evidence for you to show your potential employers or even your company as well, or even your customer, that you are competent in BIM, right? So as a professional, BSI, we have launched, and SIBL, we have launched together a BIM so-called certification together, and which I'll later bring you on how's the pathway we like. But generally, with BSI and SIBL working together, we hope that we'll be able to bring further recognition to this learning that that potentially you'll be opting in for. So as what Andy has shared, BSI, we are a global brand. I think our status as a national body over the UK has give us very, very good kind of standing as well and recognition when it comes to our stature when it comes to international standards, especially relating to BIM. And with SIBL working together as well, that SIBL will also be able to provide you further local validation and industry recognition as well, especially in terms of the certification process, which I'll share further on later. Mary, can you go next? Right. So essentially, the pathway, you will get to choose the two different pathways. So one is on like what Coffee has shared during the different life cycle of the construction to building asset. We have essentially two pathways that you can look into. One would be the BIM Project Information Qualification, and another one would be the BIM Asset Information Qualification as well. And at the end, there's also an option for certification, which means you'll be able to then apply and demonstrate that you have applied the different BIM knowledge that you have through the projects that you've done, and be able to recognize as a certified professional. So this is what a typical pathway would look like. I'm just sharing first for the project information pathway. So over here, if you can bring your attention to the top, there's essentially three elements to this qualification pathway. They'll be going through different training courses. We call it modules. So the different training modules, and with each modules, there's also an online exam as well for you to complete, to be able to show that you really understand and really have learned all the things that are covered during the training itself. And at the end of the journey, not really end, but really after you have completed the training and exams as well, there's an option for you to even go further by being certified. Being certified, it means that you are able to show your experience by showing us evidence to the panel of reviewers that's from SIBL, to show that you have implemented BIM through your different experiences, and you have attended and partially as well as to complete the training course and exams as well, which is part of the prerequisites of obtaining the certification, right? So if you go below, I think it's a similar pathway for asset information as well. I'd just like to bring you towards the bottom of the screen where you see three different logos. So if you find it to be very familiar, then yes, it's also what Sonny has showed to you earlier. So Sonny, it's also one of our past participants for our BIM qualification, and he's proudly showing the mark of trust that you will gain when you complete the different pathway. So the first mark of trust that you gain is by completing the first three modules, which will allow you to be qualified as a practitioner. And then by completing another two modules on security BIM and BIM health and safety, right, for example, will help you to bring further your knowledge on by being a BIM professional. Okay, and lastly, of course, the certified level which we have shared about. So, Derek, can you go next? Right. So the different levels really have a different kind of implication to it or meaning to it really. At a practitioner level, you have shown that you have a very broad, very good understanding of why BIM is required, why is it important, and how to implement it, because you provide you with an introductory level of the standard, right? And subsequently, when you're able to apply for BIM asset information, for example, on a professional level, whether it's asset or project information, it means that you have understood beyond what just the basic BIM requirements will require you to do, as well as the additional information that is required, including using the BIM to improve health and safety, right? And lastly, this is the certified stage, the one on the top, which means you have proven that you have industry experience and being able to apply BIM in actual practice. So I'll share more on the certification criteria in the next slide. Right. So this certification criteria will include, requiring you to demonstrate application of applying BIM in the workplace at least for 3 years. So prior experience that we have done before will also count and so on. So essentially, it's important for you to show that you have 3 years at least of experience. And you also need to complete an application form, which will also include some written questions as well, which you have to answer. And upon being certified for this, your certification will be valid for 3 years. So among this certification as well, there's also a continual professional development, or most of you might have known as CPD, right? Which will be made available through different courses or webinars that that you can attend and be recognized by SIBL. So this certification is a launch. It will be a joint certification with BSI and SIBL together. And one of the things you receive is, other than mark of trust that you see at the bottom, right? You also receive, of course, the certificate and transcript, so which will show all the different modules and exams that you have completed with this journey. Right. So yeah, just do a bit of shameless plug, I think. What we like to share with you is that the program currently is very much ongoing. In fact, the picture that you see on the left, right, is our first batch this year that happened sometime in January, and very happy to share that we have about 14 participants that have already started this journey, and most of them has already completed up until the professional qualification level as well. So I think with what Dr. Susie has shared earlier, so I think overall in the industry, the government has also shared that they are looking to develop up to 80,000 professionals when it comes to BIM. So the potential when it comes to BIM in terms of for you professionally as an organization as well, I think it is a very big opportunity for the industry to go ahead with that, right? So we also have a next upcoming dates in September, which currently it's very much close to fully subscribed. But more information about the course and this we will share with you at the end of the webinar as well, through the email follow-up. Right. So yeah, we will make this link available for you so you to take a look on. Just basically give you an overview of BIM, or BSI's and SIBL's BIM qualification. And if you need any further inquiries, please feel free to contact us on our phone number, of course, in Singapore, or email us at info.sg@bsigroup.com. All right. Right. So yeah. So thanks for allowing me to share. So before I hand over to Vanessa, just looking forward to hear from you in terms of if you have any interest on attending or the BIM training from BSI according to qualification. So you'll be part of the so over the last 2 years when we have launched globally, right, BSI, we have trained up to 2,000 participants on ISO 19650 globally, and just to share more about the qualification, currently globally we have about up to 200 participants, not only from Singapore, of course, it's from over the Europe, over in the APAC as well, and over in the Americas. So currently there's about 200 personnel that has been qualified through us, and someone like Sony who is able to show the cert and be able to use the qualification on their CV. Right. Thank you very much. Pass to you, Vanessa.
All right. Thank you, Hao Yong.
Yes.
Okay, so we will now open the Q&A session. Thank you very much for writing these questions. There are some excellent questions that have come in during this time. So thank you to everyone that has posted questions to our speakers earlier. Now, I'm just going to remind you that for those who wish to write a question, please use the chat control located at the bottom window. If you are on a mobile device watching this, tap participants and then chat. Okay, so we are just going to address the first question now. Are BSI and ISO different entities? So thank you, Shahrul, for this question. He says, I see that ISO 19650 is published in both ISO and BSI websites. Now, for this question, I'm going to invite Andy to answer it. Andy, over to you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Yeah, it's a very good question. And the simple answer really is that BSI and ISO are separate organizations. However, as I explained earlier in my presentation, what we do is work very, very closely. So in the respect of BIM standards, really BSI led the way in developing the first standards, but then worked very, very closely with ISO to refine those standards and develop the now ISO 19650 suite of standards. So we are separate organizations. However, we work very, very closely for the same objectives, really, is you know, to help standardize through shaping standards to help drive change. This is why you'll see the standards are available both from ISO but also from BSI, and you'll find that with most international standards organizations. You'll be able to purchase those standards from ISO, but also from BSI. Vanessa, if you don't mind, could I just could I take the next question that I see there while I'm talking about ISO standards, because there's a great question from Gerardo there as well, that if you don't mind, I'd like to volunteer to answer that one. That's a great question. So how does ISO 19650 relate to other international standards, such as ISO 9001? Really good question. Now, if you think about the easiest way to explain the relationship, really, is if you think about ISO 9001 and its basic framework, which is built upon the commonly known cycle of plan, do, check, act. It's a natural cycle of how you integrate systems. There is synergy between the framework of the standards. They're not directly related, but one would support the other. So as with many of the system certification standards, really at the heart of those standards is a common framework for how you operate, how you actually shape your culture and drive continuous improvement. And that's very much shared. That ethos is very much shared between the two ISOs. ISO 19650, as you can appreciate, is absolutely relevant to the very specific requirements for successful BIM implementation. So it details very much the processes that you need to capture in your organization, but still adopts that same methodology. So there's alignment between the two standards in that respect. I'd just like to add as well, from a BSI perspective, this was a question that I asked when we first started to look at how we support global organizations with adopting best practice, and we developed a certification kite mark for BIM. And we actually looked at the synergy between the two standards and felt there was such a close relationship that actually, to achieve that certification, an organization would have to have an ISO 9001 base system. They may not need to have certification, but they certainly would need to have the framework for ISO 9000 to be able to then go on to certify to ISO 19650. So the two are very much harmonized in terms of their structure. I hope that helps, Vanessa. Sorry to jump in with the next question, but it was one that I saw where I thought, that's a great question. I certainly asked that myself many years ago.
All right, thank you, Andy. Okay, we've got another question about how many companies in Singapore have achieved ISO 19650 certification. I'm going to invite Kok Hui to answer that question. Kok Hui, please.
Hi, thanks, Vanessa. Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think over the years, BIM certification has taken up speed, and I would say VBSI, we have certified a couple across APAC, definitely including Singapore as well. And mainly also we do a lot of certification in Indonesia, you'd be surprised, and also in Singapore. Number-wise, I may not have the actual number with me right now, but I look across APAC, probably in BSI, we have already certified close to probably 30 so far in terms of 19650, yeah. Across APAC. Of course, very different countries will have varying degree of certification. That's all. That's what I can share at this moment without the data sitting in front of me. Yeah, thanks, Vanessa.
All right, we have a next question from Don, who's asking, how can an individual obtain ISO 19650? Does an individual require ISO 19650 in order to get certified? Now, I think this question is best answered by Hao Yong. Hao Yong, can you take this, please?
Right. Thanks, Vanessa. So Don, thanks for your question. I think there are two parts to this question. So first thing is, I think 19650 is actually the standard for the organization to obtain related to BIM. So what we have shared earlier is actually the personal qualification to ascertain and assess, right, that the person has a complete knowledge of ISO 19650 in order to implement it in the organization. So the short answer is that an organization, an individual does not require necessarily a formal training in order for the organization to be certified, right? However, realistically, for the organization, in order for you to go for 19650 as well, your source of knowledge would come from different. So the most direct way, right, is to attend the course and be able to hear, the tutor to share with you on the requirements on 19650, which will help you even more to understand what's required and be able to help you fast track in terms of what you need to know to implement in the organization. So getting certified, however, it's also an additional advantage that I would say that will be given to you and your organization as well. For example, if you're being able to demonstrate that not only you're trained, but you have good knowledge and being able to that you have gone through certain kind of assessment and also the certification as well to validate your industry experience and the knowledge that you have gained from the course. So I believe this portion, right, will help you definitely in terms of your organization itself, especially if you are the source of truth or you're the point of contact in your organization where everyone will look to you, right, to seek information on ISO 650 and 19650 and also BIM.
All right. Thank you, Hao Yong.
Thank you.
We have a next question coming in, which is that, is there any BIM certification for maintenance and asset management? Kok Hui, can I invite you to answer this question, please?
Okay. So definitely, yes, asset management is a part 3, and that definitely sits with asset owners. Definitely in terms of, when the asset life cycle and when it's in use, you're looking at, how you transfer information into the asset into the asset management life cycle in use stage, yeah, and how to use those information. So certification to part 3 definitely is available for organizations. Nonetheless, if you look at the global status right now, everyone is chasing after part 1 and part 2 because in the ecosystem you build, yeah, you continue to build, but asset owners are slower in terms of taking it up for reason that it goes into new development, and for existing buildings, it's a little bit more difficult to have BIM implemented in there. So this is where it's a little bit slower as compared to part 1 and part 2. Yeah.
Thank you, Kok Hui. We've got one more question, and that is quite similar to another question that we have, so I'm going to combine them. I have attended similar courses on ISO 19650 before. Can I have recognition on the course attended and take up BSI's qualification? Also, do you accept graduates from BCA Specialist Diploma. Hao Yong, can I invite you to answer that, please?
Sure, of course. Yeah, thanks, Vanessa. Thanks for the question as well. I think it's from Anil. Right. So yeah, I think the BSI and SIPL qualification program does provide for recognition of prior learning. So what it means is that if you have attended similar courses on ISO 9650 before, whether it's from BSI or other providers, right, you can use it as to examine some of the modules that have been required to complete. So what it means that is that you then be able to fast track to take the exam, right? And by completing the exam, you'll be able to complete some part of the qualification journey as well, which will then lead to the certification. What we'll do is that we require you to share with us your past course that you attended, and also the modules or the outline that was covered, and we will get the review team, right, to actually review and advise you accordingly as well. So Anil, I've also dropped our email address over in the chat box as well. So please feel free to drop us, and we'll be able to assist you on that.
Thank you, Hao Yong. We've got one more question coming in that says, what is the difference between BSI's BIM qualification versus other kinds of available qualification in the market? Hao Yong, stay on the line. You're the best person to answer this.
Yeah, thanks, Vanessa. I think that's a very interesting question, because I think we do see different levels of BIM courses or training that's offered out there. Some of them formal, some of them informal, right? So the best way to position where BSI is that you have what we are trying to the group of participants that will be most suitable for the BSI SIBL qualification will be those who are at the middle to top management level, right? So mainly those who are managing BIM as a manager, or those who are managing BIM centrally, the technical managers as well. So whether you are from the contractors, or whether you are from project managers, or your asset owner, your architects, engineers as well. All this means that as long as you are at the BIM level, BIM manager level, then this will be a suitable course for you. Just take in mind that there are many different level of courses. So you'll see some BIM courses that will be focusing on covering, the technical side of BIM, which means the softwares. The different softwares, they have different brands of softwares as well. But BSI's BIM qualification focuses on the management processes. So the processes that you need to put in place, enablers that allows your organization to manage BIM effectively and be able to benefit from it. Right. So I hope that will have addressed the query. Thank you so much, Vincent.
Thank you. I think we just have time for one last question. Do we see a higher ratio of BIM implementation in civil engineering or architecture? Kok Hui, can we have you answer that, please?
Yeah, sure. This is a good question as well. What we see in from BSI perspective with the certification, right? There's a big push for civil engineering companies and main contractors for the use of BIM, yeah, considering that BIM can be a catalyst to reducing costs during the construction phase. Additionally, the trend points to architects, specifiers, designers also in the midst of adopting BIM for mainly the same considerations of cost savings as well as productivity. So I would say civil engineering, architecture, both are chasing after two main factors, which is cost saving and productivity, and BIM sits right there as an enabler. So I would say it's on par. Yeah.
Sorry, Kok Hui, I'm going to have to hold you back because we have one more interesting question that has come in. Sharu has asked, there are 6 parts to ISO 19650. I previously checked that part 4 and 6 are under development. Does certification cover a certain part only or for all the parts?
Okay. Excellent question. Yeah. So certification, like what I mentioned a bit earlier, part 1 and part 2 definitely relevant to all in the ecosystem. So you will see clients are coming for certification for part 1 and part 2, design and construction, yeah, and project delivery. Then for part 3, asset management, once you have part 1 and part 2, you can go for part 3 as well. If you're an asset manager, you're into asset management, you can go for part 3. So it's on top, it's a plus to part 1 and 2. And part 5, security mindedness, having that within the BIM environment will be a plus to part 1 and part 2. So 1, 2 plus 3 or 1, 2 plus 5. Yeah, this is the current scheme that we have. Part 4, not yet, because the ISO standards will be developed for, later this year, and part 6 is in due course for the future. So currently will be 1, 2 plus 3 or 1, 2 plus 5 or just 1, 2. Yeah, I hope I answered that.
Thank you, Kok Hui. Now, that's all the time we have for today. So I would just like to thank the speakers for a wonderful discussion this afternoon, and to the audience, thank you for asking all these amazing questions, and thank you for joining us. I would like to wish all of you a wonderful rest of the day. Goodbye and stay safe.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.